G'day, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Just thought I'd do another video, just talking about something that I'm reading at the moment and finding quite fascinating. Actually, maybe a book that you've read, maybe a book that you haven't read, um, but I'm certainly finding it very um, interesting from a read, and also thinking about how those sort of the things that have been talked about in that book, how they sort of impact myself. The book that I'm referring to is a book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari, I think his name is, and I do apologise if I've got that wrong. It's Hari and Johann, and it's just called Lost Connections. Um, and it's and to give you a quick summary of it, it's really about a person who's fought depression for most of his life. And he's really just looking at what depression is, how it's come about, the study and the research that's been going on in that field. And then he's looking for other things that he can do instead of potentially just looking for a quick fix in terms of popping a pill or taking an antidepressant. A lot of us who are on our mental health journeys, we may or may not be taking antidepressants, and he sort of has been on them since he was a young child, I think, or teenager, I should say, not young child, sort of teenager, and he's just looking at different things. And he goes through and talks about what are some of the things that trigger depression, first of all. That's the part that I've read, and I'm now looking at some of the research that is going on about how depression might be fixed without sort of popping a pill or stuff like that. And I mean, when I say fixed, I don't know that a fixed is ever there, but potentially giving you other options to do sort of things. And in the book, he talks about quite a few different things around the connections that a lot of times we're losing. And just to sort of talk about some of the main ones that he talks about, one is this sense of community. We've lost that quite when you sort of think about maybe back in, I won't even talk in the before the Industrial Revolution, and also probably even before just after the World Wars, maybe in the 50s and the 60s. During all that space of time, a lot of our life was based around the community we lived in. We knew our neighbours, we had our extended family really close by. Sometimes multiple generations lived in one house, and you learned from lots of different people. And so there was always somebody there to be around, to be with you, and that would connect with you in some shape or form. I'm not judging our way of life at this point in time, but obviously how we live now, where we're very much in our own homes. We don't have as much connection potentially with our neighbours as maybe we once did. We don't have maybe such a sense of community because everybody sort of is able to go wherever they want to. So your community might be somewhere else to where you live. It's just the way it is. And then also your job might be quite far away. I mean, I know a lot of us commute by a good hour or so. Well, that probably something that's really borne out in the information age that we're in at the moment. So that's one of that first connection of around community and extended families and those sort of things. One of the other connections that he talks about is the connection with nature. These days we get a lot of our connection with nature from TV. David Attenborough obviously has done a huge amount of work with planet Earth, and we're up to number 3 at the moment. And they are fascinating documentaries and series, and they give you a rich insight into what nature is. But for a lot of us, it is on the TV. It's not something we sort of work with or interact with in a sort of a day-to-day way. A lot of us are also in apartment, so we may have a balcony and that's all the plants we get, but we may not have pets or stuff, or be allowed to have pets and stuff like that as well. So we might only see things when we go on holidays, or if we go to the zoo, or if we have a friend who has a dog or something like that. But that's another one of those connections. A lot of times when, again, in those 50s, 60s, and I even remember in my 70s and my father, there was always that work in the garden to grow your own crops, to supplement the food that you have at home, and to have something fresh. I think that still happens, but it's probably not as it's probably not there as much as it once was. We don't do that as much, and so therefore that physical work and that connection to soil and that connection to the circle of life, in terms of plants, circle of life at least, is just not there. And then that connection to probably the bees and the insects to pollinate and all of those things is just not there. And then being in that natural setting, even if it is your own little backyard and stuff like that, is maybe not there as well. So that sort of lost connection is sometimes there as well. The third one that probably others can sort of relate to, and in the book there was quite a damning statistic, really, and it's probably fairly close, is the lack of connection with purposeful work. In the book, the author mentioned that, I can't remember the exact number, but it was probably around about 70, 75, 76% of people either actively hate their job or are indifferent to it, or are not engaged with it. That's a huge number of people. That's nearly 3/4. I was staggered by that amount of people. And I mean, when work takes up such a huge amount of time, it should be something that is providing us with some reward, some enrichment, and not just providing us with money to be able to then spend on things to fulfill our lives in that way. There were other connections, but those were the three ones that I sort of really sort of thought were quite interesting. There was also other connections, key relationships, and those sort of things. And also just the ability to speak to one another, really sort of understanding the plight of others as well. But those were the three that he sort of talked about quite a bit. One was around that community, that sense of community, and being able to have a wider network of people to sort of work with. I think with depression, I know that I have had that myself. We sometimes tend to isolate ourselves. So that sort of rang quite a bell with me, that, I didn't really feel like I connected with my neighbours. I didn't sort of connect with the community that I lived in. And I think for me next year, that's going to be something that I will try and to sort of see how I can bridge that a little bit. I'm not going to say it's easy just because somebody says in a book suddenly I should be able to do this and it'll be hunky-dory. I'm not saying that that's certainly not going to be the case, but slowly I'll try and work out how I can find something that I find meaningful. I have the time. As I've mentioned, I'm sort of looking for work now, so I have the time to do something hopefully a little bit more meaningful. With nature, same sort of for me, it's something that I also want to sort of build upon a little bit. I have a dog, as most people would know, and I do spend a lot of time with her, and I'll spend a little bit more with her now. But I'm also now looking to sort of see, well, what can I do in my backyard to connect to nature? And maybe I'll start a little garden, maybe I'll start something else. I'm not exactly sure what it'll be, but that's what I'm looking forward to as well, to connect with something again from the natural world, to sort of see that I can sort of be as part of that part of that circle of life, and not just always take, but also create something, or help some plants create something for me that I can then sort of use as well. That will then sort of mean that I'm not just consuming, and I'm also doing something physical as well, because obviously doing something like a garden is not sort of something where you just have to plant something in, cross your fingers and hope they grow. If you actually want them to grow, I'll have to be able to be in there and doing something and doing all the weeding and stuff like that. So it will be interesting to see how long that stays as something that I want to do. And then the last one is really about purposeful work. And that's something that, you know, I've worked in an area where I thought I had a purpose, and I thought I was interested. And one of the best things that I had about my previous role was not only the people that I worked with, but that I could make, or I hoped I made, a positive impact on them. One of my main goals in life is to be able to be a positive manager, or a positive leader of people. Through these videos, you may not sort of think that how can somebody who has this much depression and these much things on their mind be able to be a good leader, but I do try to work through the things that I try to encourage, and also one of the things that I try to do is admit my own mistakes. And so therefore, I'm not trying to sort of be all and sundry for everybody, but I'm just trying to be somebody that they can hopefully approach, because everybody makes mistakes. And if I admit mine, then it's easier for people to come up to me and sort of say, oh, I got this wrong. And I'll be like, yeah, well, I probably got that wrong at some stage too. So one of the things that I did like about my previous role, and that was just one of the, is the people I managed, and that I was hopefully making a positive impact on their lives. And that's what I'd like to do again in most parts, is be in that role to be able to be a positive influence, be a positive role model, and make somebody else's life a little bit more enjoyable by being a good manager, a good person, and then sort of hopefully looking after them, and they feel like they're looked after as well. So from that book, I haven't finished reading it, so I'll probably go through and I'll do another video on the final things that I found out. But those are the three that sort of came up with for me, was around that community, that lost connection with community, that lost connection with nature, and that lost connection with purposeful work. And those are all things that I will be trying to rectify by, looking to embed myself in some sort of community activity, uh, build that garden in the backyard, and then also as I look for new roles, looking for something where I can actually use my skills to make life better for other people, and hopefully make their work situation in a better sense as well. So I highly recommend the book. It's a very much a very I think it's a story type book, even though it covers a very very personal story, and a very interesting scientific story as well, because he's talking about all the research that's been done. But I think it's a great book, and I think it's well worth a read. Or these days, it's well worth a listen as well, because obviously audio is also another good way of going through those books. Anyway, hopefully that I'm not doing a book review every time, but it's just, this was one that I taught, and there was another one that I talked about earlier that I also thought was quite good. So hopefully these books, when I find them and I find them interesting, I will try and then sort of pass on that information to you as well. So I hope that was interesting. If you do read the book, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get something out of it. It's like I say, every time you listen to something or read something, hopefully you get one thing out of it that just makes life that little bit easier, or makes you understand yourself a little bit easier, because that then makes life a little bit easier. I know that book did that for me. So hopefully you find the same. Really, really important. If you have any other books that you feel are quite good, drop me a line. I'm happy to have a look at them, have a read, and sort of talk through my thoughts of those books as well. So thanks for spending some time, and look forward to talking to you next time as well. Thanks a lot. Bye.